Hey everyone, I hope you all are doing good and having a wonderful day. In this video, I'm going to talk about how we can chain a cross-site scripting into a remote code execution vulnerability and eventually get access to the whole server. So basically, we're going to compromise the whole server using a remote code execution vulnerability. And the methodology that I'm going to show you is very much similar to what we have recently seen in the WordPress CVE, right? And we're going to see through a practical demonstration that how this can happen. But as always, before diving deep into this video, if you haven't checked out my previous video, then go ahead and check it out. The link is given in the description, as well as you can see it at the right side of the screen. And now, with that being said, let us get started. Okay, so before we dive any further into this video, we first need to understand what cross-site scripting is, right? So in very simple terms, as we all know, that cross-site scripting is a client-side vulnerability that basically allows an attacker to execute JavaScript code on the victim's browser, right? It's as simple as that. But the important thing to note here is that it is a client-side vulnerability and not a server-side vulnerability. What I mean by that is that imagine there is an application. For example, let's assume that for now Instagram is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. So in this particular case, the cross-site scripting is not going to affect the server where the application of Instagram is hosted at all. Instead, it's going to affect all the users who are using Instagram through their browsers, right? So instead of affecting the server where the application is hosted, the impact is going to be on the users of the Instagram, right? And this is what cross-site scripting is. Now you might be wondering that how a cross-site scripting vulnerability can then be escalated into a server-side vulnerability, right? Because we are basically aiming for a cross-site scripting vulnerability that will allow us to do a remote code execution, right? So to understand that, we need to again come up with a scenario, okay? And this is exactly what happened in the recent WordPress CV that we have seen. So imagine a scenario where we have multiple privilege or multiple level of users, okay? One user is administrator who's allowed to upload files, modify the website contents and all those things, and the other user is just a public user who can't do anything on the website but just submit a form which can then be seen by the admin. Let's assume that it's a contact us page. Okay, so assume that if that contact us page is vulnerable, so what's going to happen then? If that is vulnerable to cross-site scripting, then that same unauthenticated user can execute a cross-site scripting on admin's panel. How? They can simply send a payload in the contact us form, and when the admin is going to view that particular request, because they're going to see that someone has tried to reach them out, right? They're going to see that, and the moment they'll see that particular payload, the JavaScript code behind this will be executed, allowing the user to access that particular admin's account, right? Or if we go a bit more further into this, what can happen is that when the user or when the admin sees that particular request, the contact request, the JavaScript code is going to be executed, and that execution will automatically upload a shell onto the admin through the admin's account, right? So this is basically we are chaining cross-site scripting vulnerability with cross-site request forgery to get a remote code execution. It's as simple as that, and this is exactly what happened with the WordPress scenario. If you go and read more about this, you'll come to notice that we are executing a JavaScript which is then getting rendered in the admin panel when the admin is going to interact with it, and then is using a CSRF vulnerability to automatically upload a file onto the server. Not exactly the traditional CSRF, but it is sending the request on behalf of the admin, because in WordPress we have functionalities to upload files, upload plugins, and that is affected through this cross-site scripting, right? So this is in a way how you can find a cross-site scripting vulnerability that can eventually lead you to remote code execution, right? There are also some ways through which you can get cross-site scripting. For example, I have also created this one video where we can get a remote code execution or a local file inclusion vulnerability through XSS. We can go ahead and check it out if you want. And this is basically it, right? So let's try to go ahead and see through a practical demonstration that how it works in real world. Okay, so as you can see right over here, we are at the application, and this is a lab that I have created to show you exactly how we can look for these kind of vulnerabilities. And this is exactly what you need to do in order to replicate this particular finding across other application. And this is somewhat very much similar to what uh, the vulnerability of WordPress was about. Okay, important thing is that there were some differences like the XSS payloads and all, but the overall the methodology and the way of chaining the vulnerability was exactly the same. So let's try to see that how we can look for the vulnerability here, right? So you can see right over here we have this application, and in this application we are logged in as an unauthenticated user right over here. And in the second tab that I'm going to show you, you can see here we are logged in as an administrator. Now the admin over here has a lot of functionalities. They can see the inquiries, they can upload some assets, they can check the calendars and all sort of thing. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to go here as an unauthenticated user and we'll go to contacts. Okay, we'll try to fill this up. So I'm going to type my name right here. Let me just do something at the rate something.com, then test here as well and something here. Click on send. Let's go all the way here, and now as an administrator I'm going to refresh this page, and you can see that whenever you are on the dashboard, the very first thing that you're going to see is the inquiry. Correct. So this is what the admin panel is like. Right now it's very much related to a real world scenarios, because many time when you see applications like this, they have this functionality where you can do some inquiry about their products or their projects or something, and whenever the admin or someone with higher privilege than you is going to log in, they're going to see your inquiries right over there. Right now you may be also thinking that if we don't have the access of administrator, then how we are going to identify or chain it with remote code execution. So that will again fall into the category of blind cross-site scripting, right? So you can check out this video of mine. I'm going to attach that video here as well, so you can have a look at this, and then you will be able to understand that how we can look for blind cross-site scripting, right? But the overall idea will be that instead of uploading the file directly, you'll try to first steal the cookies, and then you'll try to pivot yourself from there to log in into the administrator, and then eventually do the remote code execution, right? But in this particular video we are going to see more of an exploitation of how we can chain XSS with RCE, so that's why we're going to stick to that. Okay, so right now you can see that it's getting rendered. So the second thing which I'm going to do here is I'm going to type everything again, but this time I'm going to try with a HTML payload. So let's try to go ahead and do that test, and I'm going to type h1. It's my recommendation that if you're testing a real application, always try to use a HTML tag first, so that you can know that whether your tags are getting rendered or not. It's very important, because maybe sometimes you'll get blocked by the firewall. And now let's go to refresh the page as an administrator, and you can see that the HTML tag was rendered successfully. We can even check the source code, and we should see that the tag was rendered. Let me search for my name. Yeah, here it is, Fayaz, right? It's getting rendered. Let me check that. Fayaz, yeah, here it is. Second, yeah, you can see it's reflecting right over here, right? And now we'll go back here, and the second thing that we'll do is we'll try to confirm whether this particular application is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. So again, I'm going to fill up everything as random email, random domain, test, and I'm going to simply type script, and I'm going to do just console.log because I don't want to have something popped up again and again. 100, and I'm going to close the script. Okay, let's go here, let's send message, send, refresh it. You can see it's here. We'll go to console here, and you can see that the value 1000 is getting rendered, which confirms that we have a cross-site scripting vulnerability here. Right now let's try to go ahead and see that how we can exploit it further to get a remote code execution. Okay, so as you can see, for the final part I have created this payload using a local LLM. If you guys know me, so you know that I don't prefer frontier models at all. I tend to rely more on local LLMs because uh, they have more privacy, and I believe, I prefer to have my data stay on my machine instead of the internet. But again, if you are interested, you can go ahead and check the frontier models. Either way, the goal here is to get a payload that can upload a shell directly, and this is the payload which can work for us. It's a script tag which is creating a new form data, and which is giving us the file that you want to upload. So pending the file, sending the post request to the same endpoint, including the cookies, and that's mainly it. Okay, So we'll try to go ahead and upload this. I'm going to copy this whole script right over here. Okay, and we are going to simply do nothing. We are simply going to fill the form back to how we did before, and we'll do this again. test@redbase.com test. We'll paste this whole script right over here. I'm just going to change the file name. Instead of test1, let's do fayaz.php. Okay, and we are simply going to click on send message right now. You can see the request has been sent, and now what I'm going to do is, as an administrator, you'll see that I'm going to do nothing at all. I'm just going to simply refresh the dashboard. Okay, for administrator, they'll think that okay, there is this new inquiry, but behind the scene our malicious shell has already been uploaded. Because if we now go to uh, uploads, okay, let me just go to uploads, and then we're going to type fayaz.php. You can see the command has been successfully executed, and we're getting the output of the who am I user, right? We can now play with this even more. So I'm going to paste it back again, not this one. We'll try to copy this payload back again. We'll say that test. Let me just type anything here, paste the payload here, and I'm going to change the name from test1 to f.php, and instead of wmi, let's execute ls command, send the message. Now as an administrator, the admin needs to just refresh the page. They'll see nothing. Let's try to access f.php, and you can see we are seeing all the files over here. So in this directory we have fayaz.php and f.php, and we are able to fetch this, right? So this is basically how you can chain a cross-site scripting vulnerability with csrf to get a remote code execution. I hope you guys have understood this. If you have any doubts, if you have any issues, feel free to let me know your doubts or issues in the comment section. And now, with that being said, keep learning, keep hacking, and thank you so much for watching this video.